Some of you are brand new faces, so I know that we haven't met before. We are, as Kavita said, we're from America, the three of us, and Atmajoti, wave your arms in the back. The four of us came from California and Oregon, and we're all involved in the life of meditation, spiritual living. The pictures on the altar are the line of spiritual masters that stand behind us in what we're doing. I always like to put the pictures up because I want you all to understand that we're not making this up. We're taking it from ancient traditions, even though what we're going to be talking about today is very modern and very involved in the world we're in. Still, what we're drawing from is very elevated ideas from very enlightened souls that they're being transmitted now into this world in this way. As Kavita mentioned, I myself have been involved in spiritual community since I was 22. And both Adamba and Tanda were also, I guess Tanda's the baby with only about 10 years behind him. But the others of us have been involved longer. And so, as I'll explain when I start talking, all of that experience is part of what we want to share with you. Not so much that you have to live in spiritual community or become a disciple of these gurus unless you want to, and of course feel free. But what we're talking about, we've lived. And so we want to share with you some harder lessons that perhaps can help all of us avoid them in the future. How's that for a good one? Okay, but let me start with music. Ananda runs on music. Swami Kriyananda, who's the color picture there, he's the founder of Ananda. He died just almost exactly 2 years ago. He's a very gifted musician, and he put a lot of the spirit our teaching and of our life into song. And so these two gentlemen are going to share with you a few of these songs before we talk.
This first one is called Song of the Nightingale. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong, as it's ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach all men how to spin clouds of gloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at our rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, nightingale. And this next song is a more inward one. It's called Farther Away Than the Stars, and it's really singing to the love of all loves. I have a love Keep me not bound, no, teach me to fly far from earth's madness, free ere I die. Keep me not bound here, teach me to fly farther away than the stars. There's nothing here nearly so dear, nearly so dear, nearly so dear. Mother, I know your love's ever near, though farther away than the stars.
Thank you. Excuse me. Your appreciation of what he was singing. I've been listening to other singers for about 25 years. As you can well imagine. Our subject tonight is loving people, in all the different ways that we have to learn to love them. And why do we have to do that? How can we do that? It's not really just specifically about any particular kind of relationship, although marriage is the great graduate seminar in learning how to love people, matched only by loving your children. And all of us on this planet together just have this great adventure that we're always having to work with, which is the fact that we're not alone here, and we don't want to be alone here, and everything works really well except for all of them, as a rule. I've been, as I mentioned, living in community since I was 22, which is now quite a few years, more than 40. And it's been a very interesting saga. Yogananda, Paramhansa Yogananda's, one of his ideas in coming to the West from India, which he did in 1920 from India to America, he really wanted to bring a new kind of spirituality into our world. Not new in the sense that he was making up a whole new concept of what it was to be spiritual, because you can't really do that. It's a reality that you adjust to. But the tradition of serious spirituality has always been monastic life, and you turn your back on the world, and you don't have a career, you don't have a creative expression, and you just live with your own gender in some isolated place. And that isn't really the spirit of the times. There's a lot of reasons for that. We are literally moving into a higher age and a different age. And one of the characteristics of that age is that spirituality and everyday life are becoming integrated. And all over the world, the monastic life is dying. The monasteries that have flourished for centuries now don't. They have very few vocations. People are aging, and there's no young population to come into it. Where I live in California, the temple that we have for Ananda used to be a Catholic church. About 20 years ago, they sold the church. Our Italian friends were absolutely stunned. The church does not sell its churches. They couldn't understand, but in America they do. And the reason they do, quite simple, is they don't have enough priests. Because people don't want to live the celibate life. They don't want to live that isolated life. Their concept of being spiritual puts you back in the world somehow. We're all just responding to this. So Yogananda's idea was that we would set up these spiritual communities in which people from all walks of life, single, married, raising children, and formal monastics also, could all live a dedicated spiritual life. And we would learn how to bring that divine flow into everything that we do. And there's certainly one of the areas where it's most needed is in how we relate to each other in marriage and in family life. These are very, very big stories. And it's going to take, I think, a while before the whole thing sorts itself out. Now, the experience that I have that I really want to bring into this situation is primarily Swami Kriyananda, which you may think this is the man whose picture is here. Some of you can't quite see. He's an American man. His English name is Donald Walters, but he's known as Swami Kriyananda for most of his life. And I have had a very long association with him. I met him when I was 22. And he was the best friend that any person could ever have, not only to me, but to thousands of people. Not a marriage partner, not a romantic partner, but a true and perfect friend. And he was a friend not only to me, but literally to thousands of people around the world. And I will refer to him a lot, and the reason I'm bringing it up now is because when you see true and selfless friendship expressed, not just in sort of one great heroic moment, but over decades in all sorts of circumstances, in good times and bad times, for him and for all of us, it really elevates your idea of what's possible, and it also turns everything around about even why we're here and why we're relating to each other. There's very few people on the planet who aren't, let's say, compelled by their karma to in one way or another relate to people. There are a few genuine hermits, and by definition we don't know about them because they don't hang around with us, they don't hang around with anybody. And that is a stage of personal development where you don't really anymore, I mean the true hermits who are really hermits for divine reasons, not those who are merely hiding from their own karma, but those who are ready to just put it behind them, don't need anymore the interaction. The rest of us, well, we do. It's as simple as that. And so we have to start with, why is it that we're so drawn to each other, and what is really trying to happen here? So many times people in their lives just live, the only thing you can call it is an unexamined life. We just feel certain impulses and then go with them. We just see what society expects of us and we fall into it. And we never stop and ask ourselves really, why we're here and what the point is. In our community, because we're now some 40 years, the children of the community have children now. We're sort of into the third generation. By no means does everyone who was born and raised there stay there. And in fact, we specifically, you're not a member of our community merely because you're born and raised there. You have to make a decision yourself if you want to be part of it. And not everybody does, because it isn't for everyone. Some of them really enjoyed growing up there, but they have other things to do. And these two girls particularly, who are now themselves, they were of the first generation to live there. They've both gone off, married, and they're having careers in other parts of the world. And the mother of one of those girls heard them talking to each other on the phone, heard her daughter talking. And they were saying, yeah, all our friends, they just go around and do whatever they want to do, but being raised at Ananda, we always have to think about the deeper meaning of what we're doing. Which, that's all you really want people to do. They don't have to live a certain way, they just have to think about what they're doing. Okay? And relationships is one of those areas where we tend not to. We tend to see other people as, I want you to be my friend, I want you to love me, this is, if I can find just this right person, then it's all going to be just so. If I can have babies, if my children will look up to me and think I'm wonderful. I have never had children in my life, although until I found Ananda and really found what is essentially my true calling, I always expected in my life that I would have children. In fact, I wanted to have large numbers of children, partly because I had a very difficult time seeing any other path in life that would be meaningful. I wanted to do something meaningful, and raising children seemed meaningful. I couldn't see any other career for myself. But I had this realization that came before I ever got pregnant, and therefore I never did. That what I was thinking is that if I had children, that would automatically make me a good person. And then I realized appallingly that I would be the same person, only I would have children. And the other thought was that I was just trying to expand myself, my awareness, my self-definition. And so if I could just sort of multiply the beings around me, somehow I thought that would make me bigger.
But I realized that no matter how many I had, there's going to be a physiological limit here, biological limit, it would still just be a finite number. And it wouldn't automatically do anything for me. And sort of as soon as I understood that, it's just almost like overnight, that whole incredibly strong for me, it had been very strong push in my life. It just went away because I realized what I really wanted was something else. What I really wanted was to learn how to love. And the reason I wanted to learn how to love is because intuitively we all know that somehow if we can, live in this world as a channel of loving energy, that we know somehow that's going to give us a satisfaction that really very little else will. But the difficulty that we get into, and this is where people have a lot of trouble, is that they think about what that looks like and think that if I can establish that form, or if I can get you to behave properly and respond to me in the right way, and then the only problem in this relationship, of course, is you. If you will just do what I want, then it will all fill that picture and I'll have what I want in my heart. The difficulty, unfortunately, is even though, and this has just been the most bewildering thing to me over many, many years, everybody really wants the same thing. We want to be understood. We want somebody to be supportive to us. We want someone to sort of know who we are and respect us for who we are. And everybody wants the same thing. And we find it so difficult to do. You would just think we could just all make an agreement and just be nice. But it doesn't happen that way. So we can work that fact in a couple of different ways. One of those is to be always upset. Why aren't they? Why isn't it? Why isn't life? Why didn't it come out the way it was supposed to come out? There's this appalling fact, or statistical fact, that I read and heard once, was that a group of people were all, and somebody did a big poll and asked people what the happiest day of their life was, and just an astonishingly appalling number of people said it was their high school prom. I mean, think how early that is in the process of your life. Swamiji's comment when he has mentioned that is to say simply this, because then everything is just anticipated at that point. And you can just imagine that it's all just going to come out exactly as you want. By the time you're in your 30s and when you start getting to be about 40, you begin to see that this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. That there's a lot more that's going to be asked of me. And those are key points where we decide whether or not we're just going to sort of shrink, lower our expectations. I don't mean correct our expectations, but just lower them. This is what I have, so this is all I want. Or just decide that people are no damn good anyway, and God doesn't like me and never did. And so this is the result of that. And that's what a lot of people do in their life. You see it on their faces. I was in a supermarket once, and there was a mother and daughter there. And the daughter was, she had a real new body. She was about 16. She hadn't used it very much. And her face was, she hadn't done much with her face yet. It was new. It was new stuff, like a new car. The new car doesn't have any miles on it. And everything about it is just so nifty clean. It's not really that the thing is working so well, it's just that it hasn't gone anywhere yet. So here's this 16-year-old girl, and she's got that look, that it's all going to be great for her, and there's going to be no problems at all. And then her mother is standing right next to her. And her mother, of course, is her mother. And the woman had a lot of miles on her. I don't know. And I don't think she did regular maintenance. And she looked worn out. But what was so interesting to me, just looking at the mother and daughter, and I have to say it this way, they had exactly the same consciousness. Behind the face, the vibration of the two women was exactly the same. It's just that one of them hadn't yet put the print of that on her physical body, and the other one had put the print there. And you could sort of see in the daughter that she was never going to be her mother. And you could see just looking at her that she didn't have a chance. She was going to be exactly like her mother. She was just going to be just like her mother unless she did something else. And this is where those of us who have a few more miles on the old chassis are beginning to try to have to think, why am I here and what am I really trying to do? Where does my happiness come from? Why am I relating to people? And there's another factor. Someone asked me yesterday or the day before, an interesting question. He asked me essentially, he was asking me like global questions about the life that I've lived. And one of them was sort of what is the essence, what's the biggest difficulty or the biggest challenge of trying to live your life by high ideals, especially the principles that these masters represent, which is this, that life is only about our own consciousness. And every experience that's given to us is an opportunity for us to refine, develop, expand, and make more beautiful our own inner consciousness. And that doesn't mean that we have to suffer by any means. And here's an interesting fact of personal evolution. We learn a lot from having our desires frustrated. I mean, it just has to be admitted. We do. We tend to learn when we suffer. Among other things, we try harder when we're suffering a lot of the time. Because when you're suffering, you've got to do something. If the house is on fire, you have to run around and put the fire out. If it's just a beautiful sunny day, one after another, you can just kind of sit in your lounge chair and drink tea and watch the birds. And we often don't work as hard. But we learn from being disappointed, but we learn more from being fulfilled. And so eventually, all that we long for has to come from us. And when I say we learn more, this is what I mean. The real purpose of our lives is to bring our consciousness to perfection. And to perfection means that we understand that we are part of a greater reality, and the nature of that greater reality is love, compassion, kindness, perfect understanding. All the things that we long for from everyone else. Why do you think we long for those things? Because we know they're possible. If we didn't, if some part of us didn't intuitively know that we are destined to be happy, we would be happy being unhappy. Do you understand? We don't spend a lot of time wishing that we were a rhinoceros. Oh, if only I could be a rhinoceros. If only I could be 17 feet tall. If only I could walk out the door and fly. I mean, people do, but they're crazy when they do that. We're crazy in a way that's considered normal. That's the crazy that's considered really out of touch. But we know in our hearts that we were made for love. We were made for friendship. But we have this thought in our mind that it's supposed to come to us, and the way that we're going to experience it is it's going to come to us instead of understanding that we have to learn, we have to be a channel for it. And of course, the more beautifully we are able to channel the qualities of our true nature, the more likely it is that the world around us will respond in kind. But not always. Swami Kriyananda, as I said, was the best friend to literally thousands of people around the world. And yet some of the people that he cared about the most in the whole world devoted themselves to trying to destroy all the work that he did. It was the way it was. This planet is a mixed bag, and you cannot always get people to be what you want them to be. They have their own destiny they have to work out. So we incarnate on this planet, and we incarnate on a planet, if not this one, repeatedly, because one lifetime just isn't enough to learn everything that we have to learn. Even one relationship, if you think about it, one friendship, one child, one parent, you can move a relationship a certain distance, and I don't mean that you die with enormously unfinished business, but rarely is the relationship perfected. There's always something more that you could have learned, something more that you could have done. I've recently been working because I'm writing a book. I haven't started the actual writing. I've just been reviewing a lifetime of notes of my life with Kriyananda, and I'm going to write that book. And wow, it's been mostly wonderful because it's been a terrific and unusual adventure. That's why I'm writing it up. But also, I really missed the boat a lot of times. There was a lot of times when really great opportunities were there in front of me, and I just didn't see them. And it's been a little painful sometimes to look back and realize What could you have been thinking? Where you had your head in a sock, you just weren't paying any attention. And you naturally want the opportunity to be as good as you can be. That's what the heart longs for, and that's planted in there because that is life. That is the purpose of life. That is the deeper meaning of things, is that we are really here to grow. And if you look at your life as insofar as you've already lived it, you'll see that you are growing. Isn't it interesting? Look at all the things that we have learned. I had a very, very difficult relationship with a woman friend who, in the peculiar way of things, is a very dear friend. We just didn't like each other at all. We were dear friends because we were very deeply united in our spiritual aspirations and our relationship to the spiritual path and our life within Ananda. This is what the fun of community is. But we intensely disliked each other. Fiercely, aggressively disliked each other. And it was past lives, really, literally. And I had a dream. It's the only dream I've ever had of a previous incarnation. I dreamt the whole thing. I mean, I dreamt it all night long. I kept waking up and going back to sleep. And it was the stuff of epic movies. It was terrific. It involved, kings and revolutions and people trying to get into carriages and galloping off in horses and being stopped by people. I mean, it was terrific. And it ended horribly. And I was the victim and she was the perpetrator. And it was just really awful. And it was so weird for me because when I woke up and the next day I realized that, we were in carriages being galloping horses and kings and queens. So when was that? But it could have been a minute earlier in terms of how I felt about this woman. I was just like, how dare you? Very weird. Isn't it weird? So, to get back at me, I didn't tell her about this. I'm not sure how she found out, but she found out. So she went to a psychic and had a past life reading. And then she found out what I did to her, which was also really horrid, really horrid. So now, not only did we dislike each other, but we really knew why. So we were just, arrayed like this. My only excuse is I was 25 years old. That's all I could say. But then Swami Kriyananda got us together, and he basically said, I think everything that you have gathered here is true. But then he said, he just looked at us. He said, but neither of you would ever behave like that again. It was such a simple answer, isn't it? Because you have suffered from all those terrible things, not merely with each other, but those were awful deeds and you were awful people, and now you've grown past it. And that just, there it is. It all clicks into place, isn't it? Something comes, now this was dramatic, with involving psychics and dreams of past lives and galloping horses and so on. But it's what's going on all the time, isn't it? What is the point? Is the point to uncover all the reasons why we're angry? Or is the point to recognize that we're all in this together, everybody's doing their best, and we're moving forward? And what do we want from our own hearts? What we want to give to others is what we want others to give to us, isn't it so? And then I was starting earlier about this question I was asked. When you finally recognize that all that you ever experience in your life is your own response to what's going on around you. Yogananda makes a very challenging statement. Circumstances are always neutral, he says. That doesn't mean that people don't do bad things. But people are just doing bad things because it's their nature to do bad things. But they're neutral until we decide that this is going to make me happy or this is going to make me sad. And if you really think about it, you realize that there's lots of things that upset other people that don't upset you. Isn't that right? And things that upset you that don't upset other people. It's not inherent. Some people walk around and they just worry all the time about the drought in California or the rainforest coming down, or the fact that so-and-so was so inconsiderate and, left the food in the sink or whatever it was. And someone else just says, who cares? It's interesting to me sometimes what people get upset about. And my friends are amazed at the things that I react to. I have one of my friends she has the sweetest heart in the world. She's just the dearest, kindest person. And I'm a nice person. but I'm not like her. And I'm sharp-tongued. I have a little bit of fire. So she just, whenever anybody does anything, her first thought is, how can I help? Just how can I help? My first thought is, how can I correct? You know, how can I analyze? How can I declare? I'm getting better. I'm getting much better, in no small part because of the example of some of my women friends. But what does it serve us? Then you get to have that argument over and over and over again. And the fun of it is, you get to have arguments about things that happened hundreds of years ago. And like, how is this working for us? Not so well, not for me. You know, to be mad at somebody that I can't even remember why. So we get the opportunity every single day. We get to decide, how am I going to respond to life? Am I going to extend to others the compassion and understanding that I want to be extended to me? Or am I going to set up walls around myself, push the world away, and expect them to serve me? And this is what I was starting to say this. I keep trying to get to this end of the sentence, and I will this time. When this man asked me this question about the spiritual path, I said, you know, the most annoying thing about the spiritual path, which has been the central definition of my life for all of my adult life, is that in the end, you have to adjust yourself and nobody is going to do it for you. And that is really annoying, super annoying. I have another relationship that I've been working out for most of my life. The thing about community, I don't mean, you have to understand I'm saying this facetiously, it's worse than marriage. Marriage is just like one lifetime. Spiritual community, you're together incarnation after incarnation after incarnation. So you really have to figure it out. And I have other friends in the community that I just have struggled to get along with. And I have a few of these intuitions, not that many, but that one I have charted out what I think is either true or apocryphal. And if it's apocryphal, it's fine because it explains the difficult dynamic that we have had to live with. And so I believe my intuition on it because it works. And it also has helped me extricate it. And after struggling with this for years, we're good friends, but it's that point of irritation where, and I was done wrong again a long time ago. I was done wrong. And I finally one day, when I was just being annoyed and running one of those little tapes in your head, I finally said, I want somebody to apologize to me. And I thought, for what? You know, for hundreds of years ago? And then I also had to admit that I probably deserved what was given to me. Because if I was honest, people don't respond out of nothing. But then comes the last part of it. How is it working for you to carry this grudge? How is it working for you to just stand there with your arms folded and demand that everybody else be different? How is it working for you? Where do you end up? What does your face look like? What does your heart feel like? Now, it takes tremendous power within yourself to be able to give without feeling that you've been taken advantage of or that you're compromising your own integrity. And so I'm not talking about what is really psychologically unhealthy, which is everybody else in the world is more important than me. That's not true. The key word in getting along in this world is the word impersonal, which is a peculiar word considering it's our own personal relationships. We just have to see things in an honest relationship to each other, and which means that I am as important as you are, but not more so. And you are important as I am, but not more so. And we have to learn, and there's a simple word, we have to do what is appropriate for the well-being of everyone involved. And it's a very subtle thing to figure out, because if somebody is behaving badly, taking advantage of you, not behaving honorably, it can be exactly the right step in your personal evolution to say, you are a scum, get out of my life. Being nice is not the point. Being appropriate in our responses with an honest thought of what is the right thing to do here. And often the right thing to do is to say to this person, this is not acceptable to me. But to then become furious with them, and even worse is this is what we always do. Why couldn't they have just been? I was talking to this woman who was in a terrible mess with her lover, and he was married to someone else, or he was doing this. I don't know what it was. It was a big story. And I'd never met him. I'd never met her until we were having this conversation. So I didn't have a face-on way of evaluating. I have learned, anybody who does counseling at all begins to realize there are always two sides to the story. But the story she was telling me, this man had not behaved honorably. And she kept saying, why didn't he just do this? Why didn't he just do that? And I kept trying to say to her, because he does not have good character. That's why. He is not an honorable man. And maybe that's a clue as to whether or not you want to be involved with him. What do you think? But think how often in our lives, what we mostly do is just want things to be different than they are. Because, of course, as long as we're doing that, we don't have to actually deal with what's really going on. And that's how we spend lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes just going through, and it's always projected outward that why can't that person be different? Well, because he or she is not different. Once Jyotish and Devi, who are the leaders of our Ananda communities worldwide, worked very closely with Swami Kriyananda for years. They were talking about a certain man who was doing a certain job, and there was some question about his suitability for it, and Swami said, I think he's doing extremely well. And then he added, given who he is. And that sort of has become one of our favorite phrases. Well, I think he's doing extremely well, given who he is. Because we simply, if we could be better, we would be better, wouldn't we? There's a charming story about President Abraham Lincoln before he was president, when he was a lawyer in court, and the opposition to the opposing attorney accused him as the attorney of being two-faced. He wasn't being honest. And Abraham Lincoln looked at the judge. Abraham Lincoln was not a handsome man. He looked at the judge. He said, I put it to you, sir, if I had another face, would I be wearing this one? And that's often what it is. If we could have been more honorable, we would have been more honorable. If we'd had the courage really to stand up, we would have had the courage to stand up. We would have stood up, wouldn't we? And everything that's true about you is true about every single other person on the planet. The only ones who don't live that way are these. And if you're one of those, you wouldn't be sitting here. So it's just the given that we are all in this together, and we have to learn ever to expand our hearts. And ever to expand our hearts not in cowardice or denial or weakness or fear of conflict or fear of really facing reality, but just to say, okay, what's true here and how can I deal with it? And then comes the last point where you, not the last, but another point you get to, which is, how can I help? And the only way you can think like that is it takes tremendous personal strength. And most of us, there's many times in my life certainly, and in the lives of great souls that I've seen, I can't help because I don't have the strength. And so theoretically, I could be great and noble here. In fact, I can't. So the appropriate response has to also take myself into account. Swami Kriyananda giving advice to a group of us who were all in charge of communities and, had big responsibilities for a lot of people and a lot of projects and so on. He said to us once this way, he said, it's presumptuous not to take yourself into account. Meaning that you also have to ask yourself not what could be done, but what can I do? And I think the essence of all success in all relationships, whether it's the intimate relationship of marriage or just working in your office, is you have to know yourself. And what I've seen, the biggest drawback, I've done a great deal of couples counseling. I used to, I don't do anymore, but I did for a long time. Very rarely was the problem actually between the couple. It was almost always within each individual. And there was a lack of understanding of what the cause of suffering was. That didn't mean people were behaving well. That's entirely different. But there was just a lack of understanding of where fulfillment comes from and and how to behave, and just a vulnerability that is inherent. It's inherent within us. We're all vulnerable. People are so tender. I didn't know that for a long time in my life. I had to have a little bit of tenderizing of my own before I began to understand. So we ask ourselves, how can I help? And the only way we can help people is to help them according to what's realistic for them. And it's not what's realistic for you is my agenda for you. And I because I have a quick mind and I can articulate, I often joke with people, it's not really that I know that much, it's that I can say absolutely everything I know. And not everyone has that quickness. It's just part of how my DNA is constructed. And because I can often articulate faster and sometimes more completely, I've made a lot of mistakes because I think that what people want to know is what I think. How interesting. They don't want to know at all. How about that? And because often also what you know is not at all going to be helpful. I had this very strange experience with a person that I never got along with, and I could never figure out what was going on in that relationship. I had another friend who became close and helped me. This person would always describe to me certain things that they were dealing with. Then I would say back to the woman, well, inasmuch as this is how you're feeling, then we should do this. And she would become very offended at what I had accused her of. She had just told me. Because a lot of counseling that I have done in my life is just to clarify for people what they're offering me. Because people tell you their story and all the solutions are in their story, they just haven't heard it. And you reassemble it and you offer it back. So I thought I was being helpful. But I went through this cycle with this woman repeatedly, and it was a very tempestuous situation. It was not working. Is that the right word? It was a very volatile one. Finally, another friend of mine said, and she had gotten it right, oh, she wanted you to say, no, you're not anything like that. She was raising her fears, and she wanted them repudiated. And she would raise her fears to me, and I would confirm them. You see how subtle it can be? So how do you figure this out? Well, you pay attention. And you also have to be extremely still within yourself. And you also have to not always do what I always do. Well, when I talk to people, this is what I do. This is what I have to offer. But where we need to be is we need to be deeply, calmly, resting in our own hearts. And we have to be concerned about the persons in front of you, their own, let me think how to say this. Every soul on this planet is on their own particular journey, and we have this very complicated story that we have worked on for a really long time. Many incarnations, I've thrown out a few, relationships that I know about, many incarnations of much interaction, many responses we've all built up. I was greeting Neil this evening, and I remembered his name from when he was here before, and he mentioned, oh, how nice, you remember my name. I said, well, you have a unique face. It would be easy to see you. Everybody has a unique face. Isn't that so? You just look at everyone. How did we get these faces? How did we become unique? We've been spending many, many incarnations building ourselves up to this point. And we've been coming toward the same center from many different directions, learning many different things. Some people have to learn to be strong, some have to learn to be soft, some have to learn to be forceful, some have to learn to be flexible. In one incarnation you're a man or a woman learning this, and another you're a man or a woman learning that. And wherever we're standing, there's always going to be a next step. It's like you all are in different places in this room. If we all head for the same door, everybody has to put their foot on a different part of the carpet, isn't that so? And so it is in our own self-expansion. Each of us has just some unique next step. Earlier in this very room when I first started here, I was talking about the apple, the seed of an apple having the potential to become an apple tree. And it's a very important image. I'm going to revisit it in a slightly different way here. If you're growing something from a seed, you know that the only way that seed will reach its full potential is that it has to go through every single stage. When that seed has a small sprout, you can't say, all right, enough of the sprout business, be a tree, right? Because, of course, it'll die if you do that. Not only will it not fulfill its potential, but it'll die if you don't treat it like a sprout. But we're always looking at each other. And we see a sprout, and we declare it has to be a tree. And here's another interesting point. The reason we want it to be a tree is because we're uncomfortable if it's a sprout. Why didn't he just say this to me? Why didn't she just do this? Well, if she could have, she would have. If he could have, he would have. So what do we want? Do we want to just walk around telling everyone that they ought to be different because I want you to be different, because I have the clever mind that can articulate it to you? Or do we really, honestly, heart, mind, and soul, want what's best for that person? Now see how much selflessness, this is what true selfless love is. If I hadn't lived with Swami Kriyananda, I wouldn't have known it was possible. But this is where you start, and this is where all relationships, everything really comes down to your own relationship with a greater reality. That's why when we were talking about the songs to sing tonight, I said, why didn't you sing I Have a Love That's Far Away? I mean, we had other choices, such as, that were much more, I love you, you love me. I said, no, let's just think about the highest. Because what causes us to mistreat each other is because we're oscillating inside. We panic. You're doing something, I feel pain. What you're doing must be causing me pain. And we don't understand that it's not their action, it's our reaction. But, of course, the whole art of learning to control and respond rather than react, that's a lifelong practice of a slightly different type. But we're brought together, as I started to say. We're not hermits, because this is where we learn it. Because it just comes out of us. It start washing like that, and the rocks start getting rubbed against each other. But Swami Kriyananda just had one intention in life. He just wanted to be helpful. He wanted other people, he wanted to help you grow. And he didn't have that reaction. He was very content within himself, and he deeply desired that we got it right. It's not like you're indifferent to whether people get it right. And you really want people to get it right, but you think in your mind, and here it is, what will actually work? What will actually be helpful? And sometimes it's important to say, helpful to me also counts. And sometimes what will be helpful to me is to think not about how you're going to feel when I say this, but how I'm going to feel when I say this. And it may just be important for you to speak your truth. And you are an equal player in this. And at this moment, to say what you think and not care about what effect it has, but just stand up, may be where you have to put your foot next. Or, this is the way I always think about it, there's a spectrum of responses in every situation, from I really care about no one but me, and I'm going to try to make the whole world behave the way I want it to behave, which means having a hissy fit because you're not doing what I want you to do, to Christ-like love and forgiveness. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And I always sort of try to figure out where on the spectrum I fit. And I find the most authentic spot where I can stand. And then you have to be real in that spot. But even in that spot of, I really can't handle this anymore, this has to change. You can do that in 100 ways. So once you get down to where you need to be, then you have another spectrum, which is, do I completely lose track of the fact that in the end, it's just me and my consciousness, even though I'm taking a strong stand at this point? Or can I just keep a piece of that, just keep a piece of it knowing that this is the best I'm going to do? Now, what I was going to say a few minutes ago about working with people, which is something very important, all of us have a higher dimension of understanding within us. It's our superconscious self. We live in the conscious mind We're strongly influenced from the past, which is what the subconscious is, not just in a psychological sense, because the subconscious really extends back into past lives. Everything that we've already done that have brought us to this point, that make us who we are. It's all in there. There was a situation in our community where after one marriage broke up, and because the man was really in love with someone else, and everybody tried as hard as they could, but finally it just had to go in that direction. The next day, Swami Kriyananda had all three of them at his house, having dinner together. In fact, he had the women cook together. Because we were all old friends, it was a very tough situation. When Swami said he was going to do that, I said, "Sir, do you know what happened yesterday? It's like, are you crazy?" But his response was, "Well," he said, "they're going to have to get over it sometime." He said, "Why wait to some future life when they don't even remember why they dislike each other? Why not just face into it right now?" And the woman the rejected woman who had a pretty tough row, she said, "Well, because he believed that I could do it." She said, "At least for that time, I was able to do it. I was just able to think, everybody's doing the best that they can do, and we'll just go." She said, I wasn't able to hold that continuously, but it told me what I was capable of, because otherwise what happens? But what I was going to say is, everybody has their soul nature. Someone said to me once about something very difficult, it was a karmically scheduled event. That's how he put it. He said it just had to happen. Nobody did anything to anybody. It was just a karmically scheduled event that you had to go through, and that was it. You needed to learn something, and it was going to happen. And everybody just played their part in making it happen for you, because it was necessary for your personal growth. But we all have this soul destiny, whether it's written in our horoscopes, or people read it out of your chakras, or you dream it or intuit it, or wherever you find it. We have this destiny. We know where we're going, and we bring ourselves precisely to where we need to be in order to take us where we're going. And you can work with people if you really understand that. This is something I found extremely helpful, both in counseling and in other situations. I literally not only pray to God, but I actually pray to the superconscious dimension of the person I'm trying to be with. And you pray in this way: what do you want me to do? What are you trying to make happen here? Because we have that soul knowledge within us. We really do know what we're trying to make happen here. And I've had very interesting experiences when you get into this. You're with someone and you're not sure which way to go. And I've had this, Swami assigned me to speak to this woman about a very difficult circumstance that she was in. And I was really not looking forward to it. And we were on this long car ride together, and we're driving along, and just silently, you don't say this out loud, silently, I said to her superconscious, what do you want? What can I do that will really help you? And I sort of held this potential problem in the spiritual eye is that's where I put my hands here. I held it up to the light. And I prayed to her, I said, "Help me." And she turned to me and she asked me about the very thing that I was thinking of talking to her about. She opened the conversation. And all of a sudden I was just able to say everything that I wanted to say. Now, I have done that exact same situation. Help me. How can I talk to you about this? And then the idea will disappear from my consciousness, and I won't remember it, sometimes even for weeks. Weeks later, it will occur to me, oh, I was going to talk to so-and-so about that. But instead of just assuming, I tried to tune in if this was right. And it was like so not right that the cosmos just ate it and just took it away and never gave it back to me. And I've watched Swami Kriyananda many times. He doesn't just barrel in, he just starts a little. I wrote a book about him, and there was this man who, with stories, this man who had made certain decisions, and he'd moved into a situation that was really not the best for him. And every time Swami would meet him, Swami would start the conversation by just seeing if he was ready to reconsider his fundamental decisions. And he never was for 10 years. And Swami would start, and then it would be clear that the man was still wedded to this direction he was in. So then Swami would just start helping him continue in that direction. Because he's not ready to change, so I want to stay his friend. And he just stayed his friend. And then finally, after 10 years, Swami brought up again, sort of tried to feel it out. And all of a sudden he was open. And I don't think that man, actually I know for a fact, he never knew. Because he never even heard Swami testing the water. He wasn't going to listen. So what are we doing? We're doing that which is helpful. Now, how much patience does this take? How much selfless love does this take? Lots, huh? How rebellious do we feel about this? Very, right? But I can't think of another way to happiness. And believe me, I've beat the walls of heaven looking for one. And I live with wonderful people. I live with serious people who are really serious about their self-development. And I've not yet found another solution than a very expansive, compassionate understanding and always bringing it back to myself. This is happening to me because there's something in it I can learn in a balanced, not a stupid way. And that's what I always want to emphasize. It's perfectly fine to say, well, given who this person is, who is a big jerk, this is naturally what he's going to do. You can call somebody a jerk, because some people are, or just morally bankrupt, or utterly defensive, or completely emotionally dead. All of those things can be true. But what is going to be helpful, given that? And how well do we respond when people just tell you to be different? I used to think you could just tell people to be different, and then I noticed how unwelcome that was when it was offered to me. Just how immediately, you don't want to hear it. But the power of unconditional love is something else. I'm very fortunate in my life to have a few friends who are just, I don't know what planet they're from. It's not the same planet I'm from. This one woman friend of mine, she passed away a number of years ago. She just was the sweetest person I ever met. When she got cancer, she said, I don't have the luxury. She died of cancer. She says, I don't have the luxury now of having a single negative thought, she said. And she just said it so cheerfully. It's gone. I just can't do that anymore, because look at me, I have cancer. There's just no room anymore for any negative thinking. She was already like an angel. But she just added that in. And I watched her one day. She ran this retail store for Ananda. And somebody in the accounting office had set up some things that just were totally not in the best interest of her project, and she hadn't been consulted. She had a long list of very legitimate complaints. And she was just annoyed. And I was talking to her at the counter, and her telephone was over there. So she's going on a little bit in her very sweet way about this decision and what were they thinking and why didn't they ask me, and I don't know how they expect me to run this business like this and this. And then she starts across like to here. And then she refers to it was a woman who'd made that decision. And she just commented about the fact that, wow, she not only works full time, she's raising children. And my friend didn't have kids. She has 2 children she has to take care of, not only her whole job, but those kids. She gets a little farther and said, and they're really nice kids. She's a great mom. And she gets here and she's sort of shaking her head. I just don't know how she does it. She picks up the phone, and when she gets the woman on the phone, she says, hi, how have you been? She just expanded the picture. And then she really did say, I really need to talk to you about this because it's not working for me. But she wasn't coming at her anymore. She had moved inside of the woman. You see the difference? When you're standing inside, it always looks so different. And the way Swamiji said it to me about the situation I was in, he said, why don't you try to think what he's trying to accomplish? What is it that he's trying to do, and why does he think that's a good idea? From his perspective, given the reality, all the realities that he's working with, why would he have made those choices? We tend to say, why did you do that? Instead of saying, why did you do that? And that's where you go into the superconscious. What is it that you're trying to make happen here? Why are you behaving this way? And what are you ready to hear from me, if anything? And see, that's the hard part, because lots of times there's nothing you can do. You just have to let the story play itself out. And when we talk about praying for people, which is a really terrific way to make things work, sometimes when you pray, things do not get better. Because people have to finish their own cycles before they're going to turn around. You have to go all the way out to the buoy before you make the U-turn. And we don't want people to have to do that, but do we want them to ever learn anything? And is it really, I mean, of course we suffer when they suffer. How a woman wrote to me recently about her own child who was a drug addict. And she said when he was in rehab, the question was raised, how can you tell if an addict is lying to you? And maybe you all have heard this line, I'd never heard it, if his lips are moving. That was the answer. But think how much heartbreak is contained in that, you know? If he's talking to you, he's lying to you. And that was what they all were saying to each other so that the mother would know. The mother, of course, I mean, how can you imagine? You don't want your child to have to suffer like that. But do you really want your child, your husband, your friend, yourself, do you really want to learn? Or do you just want it to stop? Swami Kriyananda grew up in Romania, and he was born in 1926, and his father is American, but was a geologist for Standard Oil. And so they lived in the oil field of Teliagen. And it was a bit of a backward country comparatively at that point. And he had colitis and Swami wasn't able to take milk or milk products, and as a result his teeth didn't develop really well, and he had, lots and lots of fillings. And where the dentist was there, they didn't have some of the more sophisticated things, and so they didn't always have good Novocaine. And so the drilling was very painful. And so the dentist would often stop drilling before the tooth was cleaned out, and he would just put the filling on top of it. Now you can imagine what a problem that caused Swami for the rest of his life, because he didn't want to cause him any suffering. So how many times do we make decisions? How many times are our prayers even stop the suffering, not learn the lesson? Become free of this difficulty. How much true love does it take to really be able to stand by and help someone learn a lesson? I'm not even talking about enabling, which is a whole nother step, but I just mean to just have the courage to help someone actually go through whatever they're going to actually have to go through, and not panic and try to stop it. What is true love? Even with your own self, to not panic and try to stop it. I mean, I panic all the time. Sometimes my prayer is, I can't even say, help me to want this, help me to want this. I have to put several, conditions on it. In some dim theoretical universe, I would like to learn that, but I'm so not interested in learning it right now. We have just a long ways to go. But have a little sense of humor, but also sometimes with people, this is where the best prayer for people is that the divine light come into them. Just pray that they be filled with divine light, and then they will know what to do with that light. And often what they will do with that light is go down into the well even farther, because they're not finished. Because until you know it, you don't know it. And my prayer has been, when my parents were at the end of their life, it was quite a learning experience for me. I'll give you the whole story here because it's worth it. They were in their 80s. My mother had Parkinson's. My father, they were very close, 56 years. And they really loved each other. And it was very hard on my dad. It was really hard for him to cope. And so toward the end, my father just took a little mental holiday He just went off into a happier world than the one he'd been living in. And it was just tough all around. But for a long time, I realized what I was doing was I was taking myself at the stage of life that I am, and I'm not like my parents. I'm just a very different personality. And I was imagining myself just suddenly catapulted into their situation with no intervening reality. And so I kept trying to run their life the way I would run my life if it was my life. I was just running around just trying to make their life into mine. And as you can well expect, they weren't so keen on my doing that, which it took me longer than you might think to figure out that they weren't keen on it. I was just so busy fixing everything. And then I finally realized, first of all, this is their karma. And what I mean by that is not, well, it's their karma. It's that they've been working for a long time in their progress from becoming a seed to an apple tree, that they are standing right at this spot, and this is exactly the only way to get from here to there is through this experience. And also, that experience is not, they experience it differently than I would experience it because it's not my karma. You see, it's natural to them. They got there a step at a time. And every step was what they felt they should do. And maybe, I would have done it differently, but guess what? I'm not them. And so every step they took, so where they were standing at 83 was a very natural progression from where they started. There's a little story about a little child who went to a facility where there were a lot of older people, and she was talking to a very old woman. How old are you? And the lady said, 90. And the little child said, did you start at 1? You just couldn't imagine it. Well, my parents started at 1. And by the time they got to 83, it was a very sensible place for them to be. And it was exactly the right context for them. And now here's a few other parts of it that became very important to me. I have a lot of willpower, a lot of creative energy, and a lot of energy. And I am very good at other people's crises. I can be very calm when other people are upset, and I can solve their problems very nicely. And I could often run around and try to make their lives work, which on the surface of it kind of looks like a helpful thing. But I began to realize with my parents that what was really happening was I was so uncomfortable with their reality that in the guise of helping them, I was actually really just trying to expunge what was making me so uncomfortable. Oh, gee, is that love? Is that friendship? Is that actually helpful? No. And then there was another really fundamental factor here, which is I'm really not afraid of my own karma in the sense that I believe, I have faith that God will stick with me and we'll get through it. That doesn't mean that I don't have trepidation about possibilities, because I certainly do. I'm not a fearless person by any means. But I kind of trust that if it's my next step and it comes to me, then we'll figure it out. But I realized I didn't trust anybody else. I could cope with my karma, but nobody else could cope with theirs. I had to run in and fix it for them. But they've been spending a whole cycle getting to that point. And I realized again, this isn't love, this is total disrespect. Just respect for their process, respect for their integrity, total lack of faith in God, that that only I can take care of them, that nobody can take care of them but me. And I just, one day, just flipped it around, and I started trying to act from inside of them. Instead of having my agenda, it was just like, well, what do you want? What do you need? And a lot of things kind of didn't work out as well as if I had interfered. But it was the right thing to have happen, because that was what they needed to go through. And they didn't see it that way. I was the only one who saw it. Does that make sense? And multiply that 1,000 times. When you're with someone, what do they really need? What's really going to help them? What's my appropriate response, including me? How can I deal with them? Everything then begins to work very differently. And you do not own anybody. No matter if you gave birth to them, have lived with them for 50 years, bear the same name, they gave birth to you. Just this deep extremely deep individual integrity has to be honored. And it's very, very easy to lose track of that. And you just start treating other people like an extension of your own reality. And then you don't know who you're dealing with. You really don't know anymore. People make very bad mistakes. And you don't feel very respected in a situation like that because you're just an extension of someone else's mind. We've seen it all happen a lot. Children can't talk to their parents. Husbands and wives can't talk to each other. Parents can't talk to their kids. A woman came to me. I'll tell this last story and then I'll stop. A woman came to me. Her son was a college student and she had read his diary. His diary was sitting out on her desk. His desk. She stood there for a moment, then she opened it. Okay? She found out that he was gay, which she didn't know. I mean, he was only in his 20s. He was just coming into it himself. He was her only son. She was a single mom. She just calls me in a panic. First of all, because now she knows this about him that he hasn't told her. And the second is, she's just in a panic. She doesn't have any idea how to deal with this. So I went over and we talked about it for a long time. And she kept saying, I just don't know. I don't know anything about this. I said, now there's a great starting point. Instead of thinking that because he's your son, you own him, start from, gosh, honey, I don't know anything about this. Talk to me about it. Tell me who you are. You know, I just don't know what to say because this is, what does it feel like to be you? And we went over it on many different levels, and then not very long after, he did bring it up to her, and she just went right with the program. And at the end of it, he said, I never in a million years thought we could have this conversation. Because she was fortunate because she'd had enough time to remember that she didn't own him and that he was not her. Every time you make a mistake in a relationship, if you pause long enough and ask yourself, it's almost always because you've forgotten that there's anybody else out there. Whoa, you're looking right at somebody else, but you're not relating to somebody else. You're just relating to your own vibrations, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own needs, and you never really stand back and think, what does it really feel like to be you? What's moving you, and where are you trying to go? Fair enough? Do we have any questions or thoughts before we have a little music? Anybody want to ask anything? All right. Music.
This is a song that's poem originally by Robert Burns from a little island, Scotland. Many have written music to this, but Swami Kriyananda decided that it was such a beautiful poem that he would write music to it also. And so we'll sing the Scottish version. Alan, forgiveness in advance for my pronunciation.
We've never actually sung the Scottish version to a Scottish person.
So beg your patience, wait till later to correct me. And then we'll sing English words that Swami wrote also. John Anderson, my Joe John, when we were first acquainted, your locks were like the raven, your bonny brow was brent, but now your brow is bare, John, your locks are like the snow, but blessings on your frosty brow. John Anderson, my Joe. John Anderson, my Joe, John, we climbed the hill together, and many a canty day, John, we ate another. Now we maun totter down, John, and hand in hand we'll go and sleep together at the foot. John Anderson, my Joe. John Anderson, my sweetheart, when first we two did meet, your locks were like the raven, your bonny brow was sleek, but now your brow is wrinkled, John, your locks are like the snow, but blessings on your frosty head, John Anderson, my own. John Anderson, my sweetheart, we climbed the hill together, and many a lively day, John, we've had with one another. Now we must totter down, John, and hand in hand we'll go and sleep together at the foot. John Anderson, my sweet.
Hi, friends. Actually, you were going to sing Goodnight Sweetheart, weren't you?
Oh, all right.
Okay, can I twist your arm?
Sure. Yeah.
Many years ago, he and another friend came. Remember when I saw me first wrote this song? It was so pretty. You all came over one night and sang it to me. It was very sweet. It's a lullaby. It's a good night lullaby.
What do you feel the night may reveal? Darkness can't harm you, its fears are unreal. Light will enfold you, just open your heart. Let peace through your dreams gently steal.